Welcome to episode 12 of the Just a Moment Ago podcast. Today I do have Amos back with me again, and I appreciate you being back again today, Amos.
Same here. It's always looking forward to a conversation and see where it's leading.
Right. So we're going to discuss semi-truck driver's diet today. The challenges of eating on the road, staying healthy, exercising, etc. One thing about Amos is he's been on the road for a long time, and it's very clear he doesn't gain weight. He stays very skinny and healthy in that way, and his brother Floyd drives as well. He also does not gain weight very much. They both find ways to be pretty healthy on the road. And I do remember as a teenager going on the road, eating like buffet food, the crispy chicken. At 14 years old, that stuff would put me to sleep at 14 years old. So as an adult truck driver, it's got to be much harder to find quality food. So let's, what got you into being a truck driver? Let's go to the beginning and then go into.
Well, when I first started, I had two older brothers that were driving, and I really never thought about driving a semi. It never even crossed my mind. I was working construction. I had left Wisconsin and went out to Washington, D.C., so I was a long ways from home.
Oh, really?
My brother was driving a semi and stopped in on a Sunday and to say hello, and I'm like, and I says, well, rather than be out here all by myself.
Right.
Because by that time, our older brother was working out there. That's how I ended up out there with him. And then he went and started driving semi. He was the first one that did it back in '87. So I decided that I would go with my brother and basically a year or two, just see what we can do.
Mm-hmm.
So needless to say, it was 33 years later. I'm still driving a truck. I'm still driving a semi.
33 years later. So, and at this point, you own your truck, correct? You are no longer driving for a company?
Right. We own the truck, yep.
You both own it, right? You're right. Driving together. So running team, yep.
We bought our first truck in we bought our first truck in '94, and we owned it for 5 years, and then we sold it, and then we drove for a company for 21 years, and then 4 years ago we bought it.
Right. So you've been through some different experiences. Right. From then when you started to now, what does your pre-trip plan look like as far as bringing food along? How do you plan for your trips, back then and now?
Right. Well, back then it was not knowing anything about food. You go to the truck stop and where all the other truckers stop, and you'd walk in and look at the menu and decide what you're going to get, whether it was breakfast, what was offered was, eggs and toast, hash browns, bacon, sausage, biscuits and gravy or whatever. I never did eat no biscuits and gravy. Wasn't part of our diet, so I didn't eat something like that. I was just, and then, for dinner, the truck stops back then used to have pretty good buffets. I mean, much better than they have nowadays, but there was one brand in particular, the 76 truck stops that did a really good job. You'd have fried chicken and all kinds of vegetables and a fresh salad, which the salad back then actually looked good enough to eat. And that's part of where, it's been a while, but the lettuce in the last, 10 years just looks terrible. And I says, I'm not going to eat that, So I quit eating salads, 10 years ago, which was a big, not very good. But rather than eat lettuce that's all wilted and terrible looking.
Right. But, so when you first were driving, many years ago, you were more likely to eat at the restaurants and stuff because the food was better quality than it is now?
I didn't really know quality. We ate at the truck stops because that's where we could park, and they served, the food they did, which is pretty much truck stop food, or, so you're talking about, regular menu, like you walk into pretty much any other restaurant, full breakfast menu, and then about 11 o'clock, they would put out their buffets. And then if you didn't hit that, you would maybe get something else that was on the menu that looked good. I would spend probably quite a while looking at the menu because it seemed like if you didn't, there's always something you'd miss.
Mm-hmm.
And I like to find things that are pretty good, so
right.
I like to look and look. And I would eat chicken parmesan for some reason after, this is like 3 or 4 years into it. I kind of liked that for a while, but it didn't last too long.
You're big on how food makes you feel, right? I know some people will eat no matter what it makes them feel and they deal with it, but you would rather eat, and especially on the road, you feel good.
Yeah, at that point, I was more into taste. I didn't really know the negative effects of food yet. So
Right.
if something tasted good, and it was I would eat it. Little did I know that most of it was fried in oils. They were horrible. I
Mm-hmm.
Back then it went from simple oils they were using 30, 40 years ago. They'd have to, if they were deep frying something, they'd have to change it out every 3 to 4 days,
Right.
at least once a week. And then they got into these synthetic oils where they could change them out some as much as 30 days.
Mm-hmm.
But needless to say, after 2 years, because I started in July of 1990, and then by November of 92, we weren't functioning real well. It was obviously affecting us a lot. We didn't know exactly what it was. Many years later, we finally found out about the oils and said, well, if them oils were as bad as what we now know, then that's the reason why your body just became more lethargic,
Right.
and just became less and less, you know, able to function as a human being. Because it gotten so bad that we weren't functioning. We didn't feel like we could go back into anything else. Our health had slipped. Our strength was gone. In fact, I got off the road in '92, in November of '92, and then did local work. Drove a milk truck and picking up at the farms until the fall of '94. So that was almost a 2 year break.
Right.
And I had really not done that well for 2 years. I mean, I was working part time.
So the first 2 years on the road, eating all that just for taste really drained you. You actually had to come off the road for 2 years.
Yep.
And what did you change your diet at home then?
Oh, at home it was fine because we would.
I'm saying you weren't eating out or anything.
Oh
You were
no,
eating at
yeah,
home,
yeah,
making meals, trying
yeah.
to be more healthy
It would
and
be.
get
It would. We would. At that point, we didn't know much about food either, but we were eating what we normally would at home. So we would go to the local butcher shop, get a couple pounds of hamburger.
right.
Um, we would grill out. We would, if we had spaghetti, we would have a spaghetti dinner. We would heat up the hot water and drop it in there,
Mm-hmm.
brown the hamburger. Breakfast was eggs, and
But making it at home, you
yeah,
don't eat
yeah.
all that oils and all
No,
the
we
stuff
weren't
they're
using.
giving
We
you.
were
And
using butter and things like that. And
mm-hmm.
so surprisingly, in by the fall of it took until the fall of '94 for me to really start to feel like, oh wow, I'm actually, once again functioning as a human being.
Mm-hmm.
So at that point, my brother that I'm working with now, Floyd, is 4 years older, and he was talking about getting his own truck and getting his own company and his own authority. And I said, well, why don't you just go work for somebody, what they call a owner operator? They'll lease their truck onto somebody.
Okay.
And figure get your feet wet a little bit. So that's what happened. We bought the truck in '94, in November of '94, and then for the next 4 years we worked for somebody as an owner operator, which means that they
As
would
team?
contract you.
As a
We were a
team.
team, yeah, yeah. And the way we ran team was a little different than everybody else because the only reason we ran team was because the company had schedules that you would have to run 700 miles in a period of whatever time it was. We walked in and talked to the owner, and he's like, well, we leave Wisconsin Friday night. Friday afternoon we get loaded. We're in LA Monday morning, and then we roll up the coast about 300 miles and load up our produce, and we usually get loaded by Tuesday morning, and then we're back here Thursday morning. We're like, I don't think so. I think we'll be running team.
Right, right.
So for us, it was like, 800 miles a day. We would get loaded Friday night. We would run 600 miles out into South Dakota, and then go to sleep. And the next day we'd make it into Utah, and then which is Saturday, and then on Sunday afternoon we would drive on down to Southern California.
Mm-hmm.
And the one advantage was that if everything went good, you would get unloaded Monday. You would bounce up the coast, which was a nice drive. I mean, it was usually out of LA by noon, and then you would drive the 250, 275, whatever it was, up to where they have the produce in Northern California, Salinas, California area. Then you would check in, and you would have like 4 or 5 different places to go to, and you would check in, tell them you're there, and then when their product was ready, they would either call you or you would get in contact with them, and it would take until, this is 4 o'clock in the afternoon. You'd roll into town, and within 2 hours, you might have the first pick on, and then a couple hours later, and then usually by midnight, 2 o'clock in the morning, you'd have the last one on. I was sleeping because my brother Floyd would run the night shift a lot of times and do the loading. So I'd wake up about 6 in the morning, and Floyd would be just rolling out of town. He's like, "Yep, we're loaded." And the first thing we would do is go up to a really good restaurant that we had out there, and just north of Hollister, California. It's actually just a little bit, maybe 20 miles north of there. And we enjoyed our really good breakfast, and that was like a really good spot. We really seeked out better food, way back then.
That's good.
We did not want to enjoy, just greasy something. We wanted something good.
So from your first 2 years, you were aware that you had to seek out, because you're much further into your driving now at that point.
The first 2 years, we did not know.
I'm saying, but now at this point later in your driving, you know that from your past experience, you need to find better food, not just for taste, but
2 years at home. And then when we went back on the road, we were definitely looking for better food, anything that was better.
Mm.
But the funniest thing about that restaurant was, I'm not going to remember the name of it, but it had this waiter that was in waiting for many, many years. And he was famous for it. They had articles written about him, but they put your coffee cup down on a saucer. It was upside down.
Right.
And with one flip, that cup would fly up in the air and land, because he would catch it on the way up. Maybe as it coming back down, he would move that saucer and catch it. But he could flip that cup in the air and catch that cup and then pour you a cup of coffee. And it's like, wow, that's incredible,
Did you ever see him miss it?
He was known as the flipper. No, he'd been doing it for like 35, 40 years. So he
really had it down. Like he was flipping it perfect.
There were a few people that could do it, but yeah, it was amazing. Anybody that knows the truck, anybody that knows the road will know exactly where I'm talking about there.
I'm sure you run into a few things like that on the road, though, where people have little gimmicks like that too.
Yeah. That was probably the most unique one, though. But,
yeah.
But then at that point, running the team, there was we talked to the customers back in Minneapolis or Wisconsin where we were delivering, and they said, well, whenever they had us on the load, me and my brother Floyd, it says they weren't too worried that the load ain't going to get there by Thursday morning. So, because when a solo would get loaded late, they would probably have to deliver Friday. There was no way they could make it on Thursday. So at that point, we would roll it back, pretty much straight through. Still stop for breakfast. I mean, we weren't going to drive. We drove as far as we could and then slept if we got tired. But then it was only 3 days. So, and then when we got back, delivered Thursday, like I said, when they said that when they knew that we were on the load, that they didn't have to worry about running down to the wholesale market and buying a bunch of lettuce, because the lettuce is going to be on their dock.
That's good. So they trusted you.
Yeah. So that, then when we got home on Thursday, we would schedule the load back on Monday. So we would come home, we'd deadhead about 150 miles back to Wisconsin and be home Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then reload on Monday.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was just switched. We would leave on Monday, be out there like on, Thursday, and then reload and be back to following Monday.
Yeah.
And then,
so, go ahead.
And just reverse, take the 3 days off, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, leave on Friday. And that was why we did not work very hard. We ran 17,000 miles a month, which is a lot of miles. But we did it in such a way that we only worked 8 days about 8 days at a time, and then had 3 days off. So
you were also getting stuff there on time too. You guys were trusted, right. And you weren't working hard, but getting stuff there when it needs to be. But how does that, always making sure to be on time, how does that affect when you stop or where you stop to eat?
Well, that's
or are you eating in the road or on, in the truck, or how are you handling your diet at that point?
No, we did not really do well with, taking food with. We weren't big on fixing a sandwich, or, a lot of guys that were fixing sandwiches, in our opinion, they were just burning themselves out. So we actually did a very good job of of seeking out places that would have, whatever food it was. If it was a roast beef dinner, like mashed potatoes and gravy, and that was one thing we really liked. We had, by that time you pretty much knew your route, so we'd stop in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and there was a couple spots in Wyoming for breakfast. Utah, there was a really good restaurant down on I-15 that we counted on, and then there was another one in California just before you get down there, and then even the most truck stops were still pretty good. Their cooks were pretty good. We really saw a turn for the worse. Sometime after that, we had already sold our truck. In '98, drove for this company for quite a few years. That's when the industry really seemed to, go downhill. With the truck stops got rid of their restaurants, putting in more fast food, and the restaurants that were there were still 2 or 3, 4 or 5 of them on your route, but you'd have to drive. More likely, if you because we would drive until we get to that restaurant for breakfast.
You'd go out of your way, you mean, or
we would at night. We would try to get as close to that restaurant as possible, so we could get, our good breakfast.
So the ones on your route, you knew how far you had to get to that restaurant.
And that might be leaving Wisconsin and making sure you're in Kansas or Oklahoma, 500-600 miles down the road by the next morning, because you don't want to start, having to drive still 200 miles to get to have your breakfast, because the rest of them, you knew that if you stopped there, it'd be a waste of time.
Right.
You feel terrible. You feel horrible, and it just wasn't a good day.
Right. And one thing I think that's good about you and running with Floyd, your brother, that you guys have done it for so long,
right,
is you know each other's habits pretty well. You're not one's hungry and you don't run into one's hungry and the other's not that often. You guys are planning to eat at the same time. You're going to the same spot. You have the same thoughts.
Right. Yeah. That I have no problem with that, because Floyd's always hungry, and I just eat, morning and night. Sometimes nowadays we eat about twice a day at least. Back then it was probably, maybe 3 times a day, which was too much at the time. But
you'd stop younger. 3 times a day.
Back in the early '90s, we did. We might eat breakfast, and then we might stop for 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock for dinner, and then we might stop again by 6, 7 o'clock for something to eat for supper. Yeah. But when you're younger, of course, your metabolism was better, and you probably were hungry at that time.
Right. And you said back then you weren't eating the best quality food, but...
Well, the first 2 years were definitely not, because we had no idea what to eat, and walk in and get whatever it was, 2 eggs, hash browns, and it's just grilled in the wrong oil.
Right. Well, right, and it still is, So now, at this point, have you changed your diet on the road? Other than just driving really far to one restaurant, is that what you're doing?
We're still doing that. We plan our trips we will drive until midnight if we have to get to a spot that has good food, so that we can wake up at 7 in the morning and eat breakfast.
Are you bringing anything with?
Not really, no.
Not at all?
Not really, no.
Just maybe some supplements and vitamins, things like that, or?
We kind of don't do a lot of that either. We've done some of that in the past, but it seems like getting a good night's sleep is probably number one.
Right, for sure.
That's
rest.
Number one. If you do that, you're gonna maintain your energy better. With a good diet. But we found out that if we don't get enough sleep, it doesn't matter what you do. You're gonna get tired.
Are you often getting good sleep in the truck? Because you're sleeping while it's moving a lot, right?
No, pretty much every night we shut down, at either by 10, 11 o'clock, and then the truck's sitting until 6 in the morning.
Oh, wow. So running team, you guys are still stopping at night. You're just giving each other an easier day and scheduling your load so you have more time to get there.
After 33 years of driving, we're not going to drive 650, 700 miles, 800 miles by ourselves. So we're running 350 miles, letting the other guy take over running 350 miles. And
right.
We're 14-hour days, and I drove 350 miles. My brother drives 350 miles, and we're not wore out.
So you can plan a day with 2 people as one, and that does help you to not get wore out. That's really good. That's good thinking as a team when you're this far in,
Right. every now and then there'll be a load that will have, the right rate on it, and they're like, well, picks up Saturday in Washington State, or Friday or Saturday, and it's got to be in Virginia, 72 hours later, or just
Mm-hmm.
under that. And we got it down to where we figure out the total time. On average, if it's 40 mile an hour, we know we got time to stop to eat.
Right.
If it gets close to 50 mile an hour, for example, so it's 3,000 miles, you've only got 60 hours. So that's 50 miles every hour you got to make. So you
Right.
drive 70 miles, 70 miles, then you'll stop for dinner 8 hours later. You lose an hour. Well, your 70 mile an hour average dropped to 58 mile an hour
Mm-hmm.
average. So if we get a load that's scheduled at more than 45,
That's how you're planning
yeah,
your.
that's how we plan it.
That's awesome.
If it's more than 45, we don't even want that. We want about 40 at the most.
Right.
33 to 35, because that gives you 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours throughout the day. It gives you plenty of time to stop to eat, and it still gives you 5 hours of sleep in there.
That's
Sitting
great thinking. That, I mean, and you've been driving a long time, so you've been able to work this stuff out
Oh,
though
yeah.
too. Where a new driver is not going to be thinking of it like that.
No, they.
It
And
really
I'll say,
shows experience.
when you talk about teams that are running, full-fledged team, they'd be probably laughing because they're like, we average 50, 55 mile an hour. That's how their dispatches are. It's like they
Right.
pick up a load, it's paced so bad that they literally they have some time. I can't speak for all of
Well,
them.
with experience, you're not letting that happen to you.
No.
You're not letting yourself get burnt out like
No.
that. Them other guys are going to be burnt out, and you're going to feel better than they do. So,
That's after after many years. Like I say, I have to compliment Floyd on that because he does not like to run day and night. I don't either. I mean, I'm the kind of, on my side, I will tell him need to shut down earlier so I can get a better night's sleep.
right.
He will have a tendency of running till midnight and then sleep until 8 o'clock in the morning because he sleeps fine in those hours. But I'm like,
Mhm.
if I don't shut down early, I don't get a good night's sleep. So
Yeah.
that's probably the only difference between us, is where I like to shut down a little bit sooner than he does.
Right. So, how do you handle your coffee and energy drink intake? Because I know that you're a lot like me with that. If you get the wrong one, it will mess your day up. So, if you do get the wrong one, how do you handle that, or how do you make sure to find the right ones that don't hurt you?
Well, we've always been just a straight up coffee. That was pretty much the only thing I, would drink. So it was coffee, and it was usually, 1 or 2 cups with breakfast, and then you found a good spot that had a really good coffee. You would grab one to go and drink that throughout the day. That was pretty much it. You wouldn't drink coffee all day long, and you might have coffee with your your dinner at night or whatever, which was kind of weird, but we always didn't really think about it that much. But we're finally becoming aware that maybe it's not such a good idea to drink coffee, all day long. But we didn't overdo it. We had, a couple cups, but never really got into the energy drinks. I've seen plenty of people do it, and I didn't really. I know I bought, a couple of them, like a Red Bull, or it took me years to buy a Monster. I was not sold on the marketing. I wasn't sold on anything. I finally, like I say, I drank some Red Bulls, maybe like 1 or 2 of them. It wasn't very many, and they worked fairly good. I mean, they would actually, you could feel more alert on certain days when you might have drove for a couple 100 miles, but long term, I just wasn't really depending on them. I didn't really get myself to the point where I depended on them. But the few times I did drink the Monsters, it seemed like the overwhelming sugar content was just not worth it. I mean, the initial functioning, the initial effect you would get might get you by for, so you're not going to sleep. You're going to be awake, and because if you're not used to drinking them, you're going to be, pretty well wired. You're not wired, but you're going to be able to drive for all night long if you want. If you've been sleeping half the day anyway,
Right.
because you're not going to drive all night long if you haven't slept during the day. So no, it was took me many years to really understand water. I didn't drink any water.
Right. That's actually what I was going to ask you next was, are you keeping bottles of water in the truck or a jug of water, anything like that for hydration at least, if you're not keeping
We have
food?
been for the last 8 years, but the first, you know, 20 years is where I didn't drink a whole lot of water.
Right.
Number one, you get to a place, the water at the restaurants was, full of chlorine. I'm not going to drink that.
Right. Well, of course, no.
And I go out there and I look at the bottled water, and I've learned that it really ain't worth drinking. So I'm like, I'm not going to drink that. So since I wasn't going to drink that, I mean, I didn't drink any water, which was bad. But I drank maybe half a glass every now and then here and there. But that was part of the reason why, we were not doing so well healthy wise. But my brother, on the other hand, Floyd, he would always love his water.
Yeah, he's been into water for years.
Water.
Yeah.
He would drink a gallon, every 2 days. I mean, he'd buy it in jugs and be drinking it all day long.
Mm-hmm.
And he did very well. His energy stayed good. He was happy and it functioned very well. Unlike most truckers, because he was really the one that didn't like to run more than 500 miles a day. So he would start in the morning and run a couple 100 miles and stop for dinner. But at the end of the day, he would not pace himself more than 450, 500 miles a day.
Right.
Yeah.
Just keeping himself from getting burnt out. He knows what his body's limits are.
Yeah. And the amazing thing is the company we drove for the 21 years in between owning a truck in 94 through 98, and then the company we drove for, their schedules were okay. I mean, they weren't like super fast, but we finally got it down to where we would only leave on certain days with certain loads. Because loads that were loading and didn't have enough time on it. For example, if you loaded on a Monday morning and you had to be in Virginia by Wednesday morning, it's pretty well, you don't have a lot of time.
No, right, for sure.
So if we would leave on a Sunday and have to be out there Wednesday, that was fine because it gives us enough time to.
Well, that's a whole nother, that's another day.
Sunday night or whatever. Or so there was loads, there was a couple loads where there's one right out of Wisconsin here, Eau Claire of all places, and it would be a place that would supposed to have you loaded by 10 in the morning, and you were supposed to have until 10 o'clock, which is 3 days later. So you're talking about Monday to Thursday, which is 72 hours to get to Southern California. Well, when they didn't get you loaded until like 4 in the afternoon, 5 in the afternoon, which happened every now and then. Now legally you can still make it.
Yeah.
Because you're like an electronic log, but you got to run. In that time period, I ran 7-8 hours, took a half-hour break because you have to do that mandatorily, and then finished my 11 hours. So you got 650 miles in. You haven't stopped a whole lot. Your body is starting to really tense up.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're off duty, sleeper berth for 10 hours. And then you do that same thing the next day. You maintain that speed that you're not going to give up more than a half an hour of stopping. I mean, you're going to stop maybe 5 minutes somewhere for check your tires or something like that.
And that's going to affect your diet. I mean, you're not going to be able to stop and eat. You don't have anything in the truck.
That's the point where you made sure you had your breakfast in the morning because you didn't have time to stop after that.
Mm-hmm.
But you're able to make the schedule. You're able to make the delivery. You show up like an hour early. But 2 or 3 trips like that over a period of 3 or 4 months, that had happened, that it was forced you to run that hard. It was just not worth it. I mean, your body was so beat up.
Right.
And we recognized that it just wasn't worth it. So we scheduled ourselves around and said, no, we're not leaving on Monday. We'll leave on Thursday.
Mm-hmm.
When you load us on Thursday, we'll have Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday
right
out there. And then we'll unload Monday morning, and then we'll be back in 4 or 5 days. It was a good company because they work with you. And they worked like they knew there were some drivers that liked to run. There was guys that if they didn't run that hard, they would quit.
Right.
Yeah. So, but
everybody's different.
Everybody's different. That's
for sure. So when you're on the road and you're out eating, do you see a lot of different truckers practicing, veganism and gluten-free diets, things of that nature, or is it not that common on the road?
Oh, it's changed. For years it was just you see them order an omelet and hash browns, toast, orange juice. So for some people, very few people, but uh, it was pretty much the standard thing. But in the last 10, 15 years, there's the actual menu itself will have vegan items on there, and
Gluten free.
yeah. But for the majority of the truckers, it's still just hearty American food. If they can get a steak and a some baked potato, a salad, whatever, they're happy.
Right. So if
Uh,
we say what are the misconceptions about truckers, it would still not change that they are still eating whatever, and there's not a whole lot of healthy diets going on out
well,
there.
I think there's a lot of people that do. I mean, there's people that do pack their own food.
Mm.
I've ran into.
But are they
Uh,
packing healthy food, or is it
well,
nutty bars and
no,
Doritos?
no,
Like,
well, this is only like in the last 20 years, I've only ran into like let's say 5 people that say I leave the house with a cooler full of food that my wife cooked.
oh wow,
Yeah,
that would be
and
nice
it's
though for going on
whatever
the
they
road.
make at home. She just because the cost of food on the road is horrible.
Right.
So it's like if you can eliminate the cost of a $15 breakfast and a $18 dinner or a $14, $15 dinner. I mean that's $30 a day, and then if you
Mm-hmm.
can cook that at home for $4 or $5, I mean that's going to save you a ton of money.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
but yeah, they those the drivers that get home on a weekly basis or every 10 days where they can restock their coolers, and they definitely do much better. The only bad thing is sometimes they have a tendency of microwaving it then, and
Yeah.
I
I,
wasn't really into that, but as long
right.
as they don't, it actually doesn't affect everybody. If your health is better, you could actually get away with it. Uh, if you do feel less energy, you might want to say, is this food microwaved?
Right.
Because if your energy isn't like, super good, I mean, it's all about the quality of your blood. So if your blood's in good shape, your body will repair itself. If
Right.
you putting something in there, if you eating food and you're not really getting energized, you have to say, well, if this food's microwave, maybe that's the reason. So
Right.
a
So
healthy
you
person would be fine. Somebody who's a little more fatigued or is, their blood counts ain't quite right or whatever, might not even know it.
mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden they're eating food, but they're still not getting energized. So
Right.
that was kind of our warning sign. I would eat something that was microwaved, and I'd be like, why do I feel like I
Like,
hurt?
yeah, like you're burnt out, like you
Yeah.
just
Oh
have
no,
no
we're
energy.
just there's just pain instead of feeling good, energized. All of a sudden you just
Oh,
feel
you're actually talking
yeah,
about getting pain, like
physically,
physical
yeah,
pain from
yeah.
eating microwave food?
It was food, and every time it was like it was microwaved. So I'm like, that's when
So your
uh,
body's reacting to it
the blood,
negatively.
yeah, your blood is not being fed, because of not enough activity. I mean, a healthy person would probably be fine. They would eat it, and they think you're, just full of, you don't know what you're talking about.
Right.
It's not about everybody. It's
Right.
about few individuals that struggle and don't know why.
Right.
And
I
yeah,
I don't get energy from microwave
right,
food, so
yeah,
I understand what you're saying. I
exactly,
don't have a microwave at my
right,
house. It's
right.
just
But the millions of people that do, I mean, I've talked to them about it, and there ain't one of them that you could even
right.
try
People
to
that
change their
use them will
mind.
vouch for them. They
Right,
believe in them.
right.
So,
They love them.
yeah. So I mean, when you are in the have to go and you're on the run and can't stop, what do you get at a convenience store? What are you reaching for at a truck stop on the go that's healthier that you're gonna feel good on?
Well, this is how it went. The first 10 years of trucking, I could count on going in there and whatever it was, which I don't remember buying a lot of things at a convenience store, but if I did buy it, because I would eat my breakfast, I would eat my dinner and my supper, and I wasn't much into snacks. That was the one thing that you know people always said, well, how do you stay skinny? Well, I never liked soda pop or snacks. I was not a snacker. So, um, but after, you know, you know, this is probably 2010. So it's been 20 years on the road. I would walk into a convenience store and try to find something, and end up walking out. There's nothing here I can buy.
Right.
There's absolutely nothing here I can buy.
Yep.
Because knowing the one thing I did buy for a while was like a Reese's peanut butter cup, and I discovered that I would actually feel pretty good on that. Now that was 7-8 years ago. Today, not so much anymore. So what used to work back then, nowadays, if I eat one of those cups, it would be my limit.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm.
So if I eat, if there's 2 cups in one thing, if I eat one of them, half the. It was the amazing thing is, like, say, if your cells are healthy, there's something that they'll function on.
Mm-hmm.
And if you eat something because if you don't eat nothing, you definitely are going to get tired.
Yeah, for sure.
But so, no, for us, it's a good breakfast. I like if I can get a really good omelet that isn't burnt. Anything that's burnt is
your body has a hard time digesting burnt food. There's no why eat it if it's burnt.
I get very tired and I don't function well, so it's like if you're gonna, I gotta have it lighter, and so lately it's been a little bit more of a challenge because the omelets haven't really energized me as much. But one thing I do get good energy on is still like hamburger, but it has to be. I have to know it's grass fed, so I don't hardly ever get a hamburger on the road. That's the good news, is that your cells are still healthy enough to get energy from something that's plant based, like a grass fed animal. And if I get something that isn't grass fed, my body will scream at me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm going to have aches and pains. I'm going to feel terrible. And my stomach is going to say, it's just, you feel there's like it just doesn't relax. And,
right.
And the next day you're not really as calm as you could be.
Yep. And it's once you start eating better quality food like grass fed, your body does react when you put bad quality, things that have, what is the word I'm looking for? Pesticides.
Right.
The meat, whatever they're eating, they're not eating quality grass and things. So you're not getting a good cut of meat, and you're going to feel that in your body. I know you're sensitive to some things like that. You feel it pretty quickly if you eat the wrong things.
Right.
But I actually would have thought that having a partner or a team driver would have made it easier in the truck, because you guys, maybe you would make, cut up an apple or some fruit or whatever and help each other eat on the go, but you guys don't really do that.
Actually, that you bring that up, that is something that we do. So being in the produce, markets that we get to these areas where there's fruit stands, and we will buy, whatever's in season. So if it's blueberries, so if we get a chance to buy something fresh like that, we will. So
right, but you're not packing it every time you leave on the road as like a routine. When you're out on the road, if you get the opportunity to get something in season, you're gonna pick it up and then have that maybe for a day. Or
unfortunately, where we live here, there's not a lot of fresh markets except for the summertime.
Right, of course.
But yeah, we get somewheres where they got blueberries, strawberries, plums, apples, things like that. The apples are kind of tricky because a lot of those are raised with the pesticides.
Right.
And there's a lot of the other ones that are being raised with the pesticides.
But if you're getting them like in season in these local places, hopefully they're not being raised that way. I mean, sometimes they are, but
unfortunately, most of them are. But
really, a lot of them still are, even the local.
The local, unless you go really, some really small, place that just has a few, little patch out back, and
right,
a couple buckets of blueberries, but.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that,
those will be gone before you get there, though.
There's one story I got where we had we were in the state of Washington, and we parked at a place to park at a gas station, and we had just gotten some plums and some stuff at farmer's market at a little roadside stand. But as I'm walking up the road, just for a little walk, there was this abandoned house, and I had to think twice about if I wanted to actually pick this plum. It's right beside the road, and they're hanging out over the road. I mean, I'm like, well, the house is abandoned. They're just gonna fall on the ground anyway.
Right.
There's a couple of them laying on the ground, right? They're like just rotting. And I don't know if I had any doubt that somebody lived there, I would have never picked them. But it looked abandoned. The windows were boarded shut, and it's just a plum tree. So I picked them and stuck them in my sweater pocket, and I had about 15, 20 of them.
Nice.
It was amazing. Those were the best plums ever. And then we knew the difference. We're like, this is the way you're supposed to feel.
Yeah.
A wild tree,
Mm-hmm.
that has them, that hasn't been messed with. And because the farmers that want to, I don't know what they're doing. I just know they don't want the weeds to grow, and I know they want to water them to make them grow. So,
Right.
But you can always tell if they don't taste good, they just ain't no good.
Right.
That's how we look at it. But
that's crazy. So you found probably the best plum tree within miles.
right. Yeah, it was a freaky thing. Just an abandoned. It was in a city street. I mean, it was on a busy city street. Cars were whizzing by.
And nobody had picked them up. Nobody seemed.
It's
you were the lucky one.
This house was abandoned, and the grass was tall in the yard. I mean, it was an abandoned house.
You're the lucky one to stumble on it. Let's talk a little bit more about what kind of side effects and what happens when you do eat the wrong things. You said that you have pain. How does that affect your driving? Does your partner have to drive more on them days? What are those days like for you when you do get into bad food? Because I'm sure it does happen.
Yeah, fortunately, we were very aware of that, and I really hardly ever crossed that line. So in the process, learning all that, the worst case scenario for me was instead of being able to communicate real well, I would still feel fine. I would never get tired. I was fortunate that I hardly ever got fatigued or where I wasn't alert driving. But we just noticed that instead of waking up in the morning feeling, energized, you might wake up and, you just won't feel as well or whatever. But then it finally got to the point where we just knew that it wasn't the kind of food that was going to energize it, because after a couple of days, you're just more tired. You're not really energized. You're not waking up energized, and you got some bad food for the last couple of days.
Right.
Yeah. If you just know that, in our opinion, we've got food that are just not very fresh, and if you get fresh food and rest, you got to get plenty of rest, because the one thing that matters more to us is rest. If we got to run, 7-8 days without a whole lot of sleep, you're going to be tired. It don't matter what you do.
And you're making sure to shut the truck down, even as a team driver, to make sure you guys are getting sleep without it bouncing you all over the place. Because those trucks bounce you everywhere. There's no real good, smooth driving.
No. They're pretty brutal.
And one thing I know, too, is you guys have parked and walked a mile or so to a restaurant too, right? If you can't get your truck to that place, like you've done things like that to get quality food too.
Yeah. So if there's a place to park a truck, and it's within a couple miles,
right?
If I have time, I once attempted to walk 10 miles.
Oh man, how did that even come about though? 10 miles away from, you can't get your truck
within. I ran out of hours. I couldn't move the truck for 10 hours, so I couldn't move it. So the restaurant was still 10 miles away.
See, that's frustrating too. You can't drive, and you're literally 10 minutes from where you want to eat.
So I walked 4 miles, and I said, "That's it. That's it. I'm calling a taxi.
So you made it though.
I made it. Yeah, I googled a local taxi, and it was and he comes by and he says, I can't pick you up on the road. He says, you have to go out back to the gas station. So I had to walk a half a mile back to the gas station. So he picks me up and he says, oh, I don't even know where that place is at. It's like, oh yeah, it's out on the west side of town. And he's like, Hutchinson, Kansas, of all places. And so he drove me out there. I says, well, I'll call you when I'm ready to go back to the truck. So it was like $10 to get out there and $10 to get back up there. I forget what it was, but yeah, I tried it. But on average, if it was a mile and a half, 2 miles. I mean, if I had time, it didn't bother me at all. I would get as close as I could and park for the night, and then walk to the restaurant.
So are you typically doing that when you are parking for the night, or even just during the day if you have time?
Well, most of the time you can get pretty close. And the problem with the company I was working for at the time, they didn't allow for personal conveyance. But by law, federal law says that when you run out of time, you can use personal conveyance, which is now you're not working for the company, you are going to get something to eat. So you can hit a button and your clock won't engage, and you can drive a few miles to go get something to eat. So that's what we do today. If we happen to run out of time.
But you didn't have that option that night with the 10-mile situation?
No, you have to wait till the next morning.
Oh, okay. So you can't. Okay, that makes sense.
Once you're on your break, then you can go get something to eat. You can't continue to drive
right
where you want to go.
So you can't just say, now I'm not driving for you, and just keep going.
100 miles later,
right.
I finally got to where I wanted to go.
Yeah, and then go back on,
No. But no, at least like say in the next morning when you wake up after or let's say you have 7 hours in or a couple hours in, and then you don't have to wait the full 10 hours. You can go down there, because that was what we did years ago. I mean, everybody years ago, and in 1990, you would you'd have your break. I mean, you would scratch your line up off duty, sleeper berth, and then if you wanted to go across town to get something to eat, I mean, the truckers would bobtail over there. They would drive over there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why it was so much. I mean, back then it was so relaxing, and people really didn't get tired. I mean, back in 1990, if you want to know drivers that weren't tired, that was an era that they really weren't tired. They really they trucked at their own pace, and they
well, there wasn't all this technology all up in everybody's business either, though. This was just before all that came.
Right.
People were still free to be themselves.
But unfortunately, at the time, some of these companies would dispatch these drivers, and the drivers would not regulate themselves real well. So they were going many hours, and then that's also the time when the energy drinks really started coming along.
Yeah.
And people said, oh, I can just drink this energy drink and get there. Well, that worked for a year or two, and then they would be burnt out and couldn't function as drivers, and then
well, yeah, energy drinks, if you drink them regularly, are hard on your body.
But the moral of the story is that most of the drivers back then would pace themselves in such a way that they would drive until they get tired, sleep until they wake up, and many of them said, don't use an alarm clock. That's just never use an alarm clock. Just
they weren't pressured to get up at a time. They could
wake up when your body wakes up, and then drive your couple hours or whatever, stop for your dinner, and then drive until you're as far as you want to, but never drive when you're tired.
Mm-hmm.
And them guys did very well. I mean, them old timers. I mean, I heard stories with they're like a dispatcher would call them up and say, well, we just got loaded. You just got loaded. I still need that load there tomorrow morning. And he's like, sounds good. Click. Next morning, they call him up. Where you at? Oh, I'm still in Denver. I'm still here. I didn't go anywhere. uh, Once they know that you're not gonna run,
Yeah.
they won't push you.
Mm-hmm.
But the drivers that they can push, they say it's got to be there. And I don't know. I don't know the percentages. I didn't. In fact, at the time, I didn't even really realize that drivers would do that. But there's a lot of guys that enjoyed it though. They enjoyed running all night long, the challenge of it. I just wasn't that kind of person. So I'll drive until 9, 10, 11 o'clock at the latest usually. And
That's good though. There's no reason to burn yourself out. That's probably why you've been able to do it as long as you
right,
have,
that's
because
true.
you haven't been pushing yourself to the max all the time. And you've
that's
probably had your tough runs, but overall, you're taking your time.
I really have been lucky that the way we paced ourselves with owning our own, we had 5 years of basically
Even with the
working.
companies, you didn't have to like push too hard. You didn't have those.
The reason I chose the company I did for 21 years because their schedules.
Yeah.
It was all my own schedules. It was nothing was forced dispatch, and you could choose loads that give you plenty of time.
Nice.
So
That's good.
I would never work for anybody else that
You
push
shouldn't.
that hard.
You know, there's no reason to.
And that's probably the number one thing that the drivers that last out here for many, many years is the company you choose. And if somebody is pushing you too hard, get away from them.
Mm.
You know,
Yeah.
find somebody else that's going to give you time and get you home and the things that you want to do.
Right. So, I mean, what keeps you motivated to keep doing the things you're doing, like walking a few miles to a restaurant or making sure to drive late to get to a spot? Obviously, it's health and what you go through.
Well, like I said, the walking part, it took a long time to really understand the importance of it. But when you don't use the muscles, uh, eventually they quit working. So, as simple as walking, which I kind of inherited from you.
I'm a big
So
walker.
when you were walking all the time, you're like, "You going with?" I'm like, "Yeah." So after a mile or a mile and a half one way, and 45-minute walks, hour and a half walks, I I really felt better. And but I would do that even prior to that. I was back when I was like had a day off or something, and I would walk up. If there was something around to do, I would walk. There's a couple times I would walk. Well, that brings a memory back where I was stuck at the truck stop, and the restaurant I wanted to eat at was 5 miles away. So I started out walking, and I says I got all day because I was on a break where I had to take a day and a half off,
Mm-hmm.
and I got down there, within, I don't know how long it took me, 2 hours,
That's not bad.
but yeah, not bad. And I ate my dinner and walked back. At least half that day was gone, but
Yeah.
it was not like it wasn't hard for me to do.
Right. No.
So that was the part that if I had time, I definitely I would walk.
Right. Oh, I encourage everybody. Walking can make people feel better than they can imagine. Just get your blood moving a little bit. Get moving a little.
But it isn't something that I always did because a lot of times you find out that your schedule when we were working for a company that we were driving by ourselves. You would start at 7 in the morning, and your schedule would be 650 miles for that day.
Mm-hmm.
And by the time you get to where you're going at 8, 9 o'clock at night, you just didn't have the energy. It's better off at that point just to bunk and go to sleep.
Right.
But looking back, I said, man, if I'd have just known to never stop moving, it's just whatever you do, you get in the trucking, just make sure you do that activity from the very first day till the first year. Keep that activity going so your body doesn't quit working.
Right. So are you making sure to incorporate physical activity now while you're on the road all the time, even if you're at a truck stop, just walking around a truck stop?
Well, I don't like walking around truck stops because diesel fumes and everything like that are horrible. I mean, when you see it on the news, I forget which one it was, but they're like, don't walk around the truck stops. even 5 minutes of diesel breathing in diesel fumes can slow your blood down enough that it's going to be, your heart will have a challenge.
Right.
And I'm like, really? We've been around diesel fumes for 30 years.
I was going to say, when I was with you in the truck years ago, we walked around the truck stop a few times.
Well, you got to realize that, let's say you're a person that's, trying to get healthy.
Mm-hmm.
You're walking through a truck stop, or
Right.
I mean, it doesn't matter if you went downtown where all the cars are, all the emissions are coming out. In fact, I can tell driving down the road, if the wind is blowing at you, these fumes are coming through the cab. There's so much fresh air coming from the outside into the trucks that certain days, it's just like you can feel these. You can just smell the fumes, right?
Right.
It's like I almost want to like park and wait for the wind to go in a different direction, because diesel, and this is fact, they've studied this. Diesel smoke will go in and kind of clog up the lungs.
Mm-hmm.
Gas fumes, you can check this out because I'm not going to quote it that it's
right, for sure
true, but I've heard that gas fumes the particles are so small that they'll actually breathe, when you're breathing in, it'll poke holes through your lungs. That's how small they are. So they'll actually penetrate and poke holes through your body because it's so much smaller. But so they're all bad.
Yeah, for sure.
So
are you trying to walk away from there then? Are you doing anything to get that, or is it just when you're walking to a restaurant?
Well, yeah. If I'm walking, I will definitely avoid. If I hear a truck start up, I will walk the other direction.
Right. Or do you walk around the inside of truck stops at all, or is it?
No, it's always outside.
So you're just. How often would you say you're doing it though when you're on the road?
Well, prior to walking with you, I mean, it was just so to the first, let's say 2016, so from 1990 to 2016, it was not a lot of activity. I didn't know much about it. It was a couple times a year that I would have a day off or a day and a half off, taking a break, and I would have something to do. I would walk, but it was just activity. So it wasn't like I was forcing myself to it or even thought it was a good idea. It was just I wanted to get up to that spot, and I couldn't move the truck, so I figured I would just walk, and it was like 2 miles one way most of the time. Be up there for an hour or two, and then walk 2 miles back. If it was an hour walk, no problem. If it was like an hour and a half, no problem. And I remember by the time you get there, you're kind of glad you're there, and you take a break.
Right.
But there was times when I would walk up and back, or one day I got lost.
Oh.
I walked into, it was a hiking area, and I decided, well, I walk this way and I walk this way, then it has to be obvious if I come this way, I will intersect with where I was at.
Right.
Well, when I came back out of the hiking area, which was really a woods and it is a wild area in Arizona, it was obviously I was way north of where I was at.
Went further than you
thought. I
thought.
just followed the railroad tracks at that point. I says, I know I'm north of town. Well, guess what? I wasn't north of town. I was south of town. And when I finally came out, I finally saw the town down there, and I'm like, all right, I'm going straight down the mountain. I ain't going to cut back this way. I ain't cutting back that way. And I cut down to where I knew I was at. And but that was a long day. It was like, I think I started walking in the morning, and I walked all day long. It was like a long ways.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
But hey, you got your exercise that day.
I was never freaked out that I was totally lost.
Yeah.
I knew.
Well, you knew you'd find your way.
I knew there was a town right there, and I knew I walked that way, and I knew that railroad track would take me right back to town. So,
you knew you'd find the way.
It was just, really? I mean, I walked all this distance, and now it was another, probably another 2 miles back to where I had to go.
Right.
And then I had another 2 miles back to the truck once I got to town.
You had a good walk in.
Yeah, it was a long day.
At least you had that day off though, right? So you weren't worried about anything.
And it was great because anytime you did that, you'd always feel the effects for a good, week to 2 weeks. Your you'd function better. Your
Yep.
appetite was better. And that was the
After,
one thing that really, if you do the activity part, you might feel better. Your activity is better. I mean, your appetite's better. You can sleep better. In fact, I've learned recently that if you can't fall asleep, you're like laying down, you can't fall asleep. If you do a few stretches where you work the body a little bit, you might just fall asleep.
right?
It's not relaxed.
Just that little bit
Yeah.
of blood flowing and
Getting
relaxing.
the stomach relaxed. and
Yep.
stuff.
So I mean, you're doing that little bit of walking and stuff. What are you doing to stop, the stress and potentially boredom from getting you snacking and lighting up a cigarette, things like that? How are you keeping those things away and staying on a healthy path?
Well, like I said, I never was much into snacks, so I don't have that craving at all. I mean, if I could buy something, I probably would. But when I walk into a convenience store and I see something and I know how I'm going to feel, it's going to make me feel worse, so I just don't buy it.
You have that discipline though that a lot of people don't. You know it'll make you feel worse, so you choose not to rather than still do it and just hope you feel better or you feel okay later.
Right. But no, so for me, it was a good breakfast. It took me a while to figure out that, after driving, I would always drive like, 4 or 5 hours, then stop for an hour, drive 4 or 5 hours, and stop for an hour. I could deal with that. But as far as cigarettes goes, that was something that I had to learn the hard way. I started smoking, and after being in the truck for almost 1990 to 2000 area. I want to say it was 2001, 2000 area. But learning, I didn't really learn how negatively affected they would be, because it was kind of something to do going down the road.
Right, that's what I'm saying. How do you,
Like I say, after a year, and it seemed like I had smoking a pack a day was not doing me any good anymore. So I'm like, why am I smoking these things? And I was able to throw them away for a year. Then it's like one day you're driving down the road and you kind of bored and like, I could probably do that. It definitely is a challenge. It took me quite a challenge to break it, and it really was after the effects were so bad that I just wasn't. And literally, when I did break it, it was like I would smoke a cigarette, and it just wasn't. It was horrible, and I'm like, why am I putting through this? And I ran out, and I was like, I don't really need them right now. I'll buy them later. And then I says, I'll buy them tomorrow. I'm like, well, I went one day, so it's like I'll buy them tomorrow if I need them. And pretty soon it was 3 days. But it's always been a challenge. I mean, I will smoke an occasional cigarette now and then, but the good news is, I know they're not something I want to do. So I can very quickly tell that it doesn't work for me. It worked fine for a long time, but unfortunately, like I say, the truckers, many years ago, it was almost 99% of them that smoked.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It was a big thing,
And
for
like
sure.
I didn't even know this, but I would walk into a truck stop, and it was smoking, in the truck stop. So everybody's smoking, and there's so much smoke in the air. I mean, I was probably smoking as soon as I started driving a truck.
Yeah. At that time, with
that
smoking
time,
that prevalent.
I didn't even think twice about, secondhand smoke or whatever. So
Well, a lot of people didn't for years. It wasn't
Right.
a big thing on people's minds.
it definitely didn't, dawn on me at the time that I was probably a diesel smoke. It was probably worse than that anyway, but who knows?
Well, that's what are the long-term health consequences that you've noticed from being in a semi for so long? Have you had anything arise, or have you been lucky over the years to not have too many health issues from it?
Well, I mean, if you really wanted to get down to the facts, I mean, I'm pretty sure the federal government has all kinds of studies how bad diesel is. I mean, if it's on CNN that you shouldn't jog around diesel smoke, that it can slow your heart rate down in 5 minutes, I think they really should look at, what they're putting us through.
Right.
And if they know that, then they also should know the consequences of it, because we've seen it for years. We see drivers come in this business. It's also a fact that, now this is back in the mid-90s that they did this study, but if a driver comes into this industry and within 48 months, 75% of them will never drive a truck again.
That's a big number.
So, yeah, that's a big number. It's total turnover.
And is that why even today they're still having a hard time finding drivers? I mean, there's always a need for drivers, it seems
Well,
like.
the industry has changed so much now that instead of a driver being on the road for 2-3 weeks at a time, they might run out of a terminal and only work 4 or 5 days and then be home. So now the statistics might be totally different, where somebody gets in the industry, they can manage it better. But at the time, the road, it was pretty much standard for somebody to be gone 2 weeks,
Right.
3 weeks at a time.
Right.
That's the lifestyle that somebody just said it's not going to do it. And see, we beat that system because within 2 years we had bought our own. So in 1994 or so, we had been out the road for 2 years, but we bought our own and then managed ourselves with an 8-day work week and 3 days
Right.
at home. 8-day work week, 7-8 days on the road and 3 days at home. So
you weren't pushing the 2 weeks like
Yeah,
they were.
yeah.
You were giving
but 8
yourself.
days was bad enough.
Right, but it's not
And we
14.
put up with that. But and then the company we worked for, that was the reason we worked for them. I mean, I literally, when I put in my application, was like, I won't work for somebody that's going to keep me out there for 2-3 weeks. So
You wrote that down?
well, I found out that what they do
Mm.
he said, we just run from Wisconsin to North Carolina and back.
And that's what you wanted to do because you knew you'd be
He said
home.
4 or 5 days.
Right.
You're home every 4 or 5 days.
Right.
He says if you want to run to the West Coast, you're gone for 7-8 days at a time, and you're home.
Mm-hmm.
And like, it always comes right back to the terminal. They had their own freight, so
There you go.
it was a win-win. Not everybody, is lucky enough to find a spot like that.
Right. I mean, so how many companies did you work for over the years?
That's pretty much it. I mean, I started with one that I started with in 1990 for 2 years, and then we owned our own for 5 years.
And that was lease, though, was the owner-operator
Yeah,
thing?
Yeah.
So, okay.
Well, it was a combination. We started with an owner-operator, and for a year and a half, so just under 2 years, and then we actually got our own authority, and we're independent at the time.
And then from that, you went to the company you were with for a long time, and
21
then
years.
now you're doing the team thing?
Yeah.
Oh, so so
That's
you're
it.
only with a couple companies.
Basically 2 companies, and
Right.
the rest of the time we were on our own.
So, I mean, trucking's one of those weird things, though, where the companies don't do anything to really, you don't get a food allowance, you don't get things like that. Are they doing anything to promote being healthy on the road? Do you see any of that from the companies, or are they just kind of truckers be truckers?
Oh, they try.
They do?
They try, but usually if you listen to what they're promoting, you'll be worse off. It's clueless. They might tell you to eat fruit, but the apples will be the wrong kind of apples. Nothing about chemicals. They'll tell you eat more chicken because you got to have protein. Or it's usually the knowledge that majority of people have. I mean, I've seen. In fact, the company I was with there for 21 years, they had a wellness program. Oh, we got this great wellness program. I was like, if I ate that food, I wouldn't be so well. I can't eat like that.
How do they try to promote it, or what do they do? They have like a class or something, or a video, or
Class and video.
and you can just sign up for it as an employee.
They pretty much try to offer to you as a try to make you smarter about the food you're eating.
They don't give any incentives or anything for being a part of it, though, do they? Or
I don't remember if they ever did. I just know that what I knew about food at the time was like, sorry, but that's not what I eat.
right.
If I eat that food, I feel worse. So
Right.
I was pretty much in tune. Starting about after 15 years on the road, so 2008, 2009, I really started understanding that if I eat this, I'm gonna feel worse. If I eat that, and so it was like, as long as it was something that wasn't an omelet, couldn't be burnt.
Right.
You couldn't have one. There's one time when I really learned this was I was stopped at this restaurant for quite a while, and every time I left, it just felt horrible. Not so bad that you really felt it right away, but within an hour or so, it just like, whew.
Mm-hmm.
And I happened to think, well, this omelet comes out super shiny. It comes out, it just has this shiny glow to it, and I'm like, must be the oil they're frying it in.
Yeah.
And I quit. If I got an omelet after that was shiny, I wouldn't eat it.
Right. Well, it shouldn't be that shiny.
If you use the right oil.
Omelets are dull. Right. Though the wrong oil, I
if
think.
you
is
use the right oil, I mean, it's going to be covered with this oil.
But you don't want to eat that oil, though.
That's what I'm talking about. When I'm talking about shiny, I'm not talking about, it has covered with oil.
Yeah.
It has a sparkle to it that you could tell it's still covered with oil.
Ugh.
And you just felt like that's like your body just like.
Last couple years ago, we were on our way back from Ohio. I was with Mom, and she ate an omelet like that.
Right.
We stopped at a Perkins, and I was like, Mom, don't eat that. Yeah. We'll send them back. I sent mine back, and I said, don't eat it. And she's like, I'm hungry. I'm going to eat it. We got to go. She ate it, and look, we were going down the road like a half hour later, and she's like, I wish I wouldn't have ate that. I was like, I told you, now you're tired. She was tired, she didn't feel right. Yeah. But there was just grease all over it.
Yeah.
That's how they served it.
Kind of grease, yeah.
Yeah,
if you had somebody who we love, when I go to a restaurant and they actually will fry their eggs in bacon grease, something like that, they'll use whatever grease comes off the meat, as long as it's good meat. If it's bad meat, then it's bad. But there's a couple restaurants that you get your egg and it's so soft. When they fry it in bacon grease, it'll just be, there's nothing hard about it. It's soft.
Right.
And that was the amazing part about many years ago when they fried everything in bacon grease and stuff like that. The food was not burnt.
Right.
In fact, number one thing for me is burnt food.
I agree.
It's burnt, it don't matter what it is.
I agree, because your body cannot digest burnt food that well. It's hard on your body.
Exactly.
So I try hard not to eat it either. It's not worth it.
It's not worth it.
There's get a better plate of food.
Yep.
Don't need to eat burnt food. You have another brother who drives for Martin. I'm not going to say his name just because we haven't really talked about him, but he's actually been more of a success story with changing his diet, right? Because he used to eat really bad on the road, and now he's lost a lot of weight, right? And eats a lot more healthy. Like, has really changed and had to do different things on the road.
Oh, yeah. It'd be interesting talking to him about that, because he used to eat everything, in the day. It was, the truck stop food, the buffets, whatever it was. And then...
And snacking and stuff.
Oh, yeah, he was a snacker, too. He'd buy his little, candies, and he got into the energy drinks and stuff like that. But, it hit him pretty hard when he finally hit the wall.
Mm-hmm.
And,
but he's turned it around.
Yeah. So he got to the point where he might walk into a restaurant and order just eggs and tomato slices, and he wouldn't eat no Miracle Whip, or he was like certain things. I mean, he was down to, he had a pinpointed to what he could eat, what he couldn't eat, and even to this day, he knows what he can eat. And,
right.
It might be, this portion of that and this portion of that, this or that. And yeah, he went from 275, it was way up there,
mm-hmm.
down to I don't know what he weighs now, but he's definitely lost. It took him. It was a shock to see him even close to 200. When he was way up there to 275. And
mm-hmm. That's why I wanted to mention it, because I know that on the road, that's a challenge. If you've already built the habits of snacking and energy drinks and buffets and stuff, because when I was a teenager and I went with you, it's too easy to walk in there and eat that food. If you're not really thinking twice about it, because it's all right there, and it's fried food. It's food that your body craves if you've been eating it. But once you get on the other side of it, now if he does that, he's going to feel sick. You can't do that same stuff.
Exactly.
So it's just a good thing to see people that are on the road and are making those changes,
Just to add on that, at the time, let's say the first, 10, 15 years of trucking, it was like, for us, there really wasn't any other place to go. I mean, you went to the truck stop, that was the food you had. I mean, the only other option was if you had to find a restaurant.
Right.
That was before we had smartphones. I mean, try finding that without Google.
Exactly.
I mean, where are they at? Nobody knows.
You're stopping and asking maybe, and they don't know what to tell you a lot of times either, probably.
If you had a computer, one of the few drivers that had computers that could have used Google, but prior to me having a smartphone where I could Google restaurants nearby or something like that,
Yeah, and smartphones, 2007.
Yeah.
And you probably didn't have one in 2007. So, I mean, you drove a long time without having that ability.
Right. Yeah. And that's why, finding one was a rarity that you could find something else other than a truck stop.
So when you did, you're willing to do what you have to do to get to it.
So basically, when you got to a truck stop, it's like, well, you either eat here or you eat at the next truck stop down the street. I mean, so you find the best ones you possibly could. But
did you ever? So what kind? During that time, did you do things to balance it though? Did you ever eat those bad ones and then to get to a good one later, or would you just not do it?
By the time that rolled around, 2007, 2008 area, I was becoming very aware how, I did not want to eat that food.
Right.
So that was kind of right at the area where I really started becoming aware that it's not worth eating bad food.
Mm-hmm.
That I would do everything I could to get somewhere where I could eat something better.
Right.
Unfortunately, I still didn't know that much, so better food might be just a little bit better greasy food instead of and then, like I say, I like greasy food. I don't mind greasy as long as it's real grease.
Yeah,
as long as it's real grease.
Right.
But, I don't want the sprays or the oils, the deep fried oils.
I agree. So do you have any advice for people on the road, semi-drivers, even just regular drivers who are pulling a trailer across the country? Like, how can they find the right foods and healthy options on the road? Are there any, like, truck stops or any stops that have better options?
I guess the one thing you can always do is realize that, for example, if you go organic, it's going to be like, oh, I can't ever find organic food. Of course you can't find organic. It's just got to be real. So if it looks real, tastes real, then you're probably gonna, do all right. But if it's comes out and it's overcooked and it's burnt and it's buttered up toast with this margarine spread they use, you'll feel it. If you feel it, I think this is how I explain it. Where if you eat something and you don't really feel energized or you feel tired, then be aware of what you ate and start changing what you do.
Right.
Try something else. And, for us, it was just fresher food. But we basically can't stop at, you stop and get a fish dinner. I mean, you get a Friday fish fry. Oh, that was something we could do 30 years ago.
Exactly.
But if we do that now, it might not be such a great day tomorrow.
I was just going to say the same thing. It's not even the same anymore.
So you'll find out that I had this for dinner or I had this for breakfast and I didn't function all that well. I guess the one other thing you have to really be aware of is how relaxed you are and how well you're breathing, because if you can actually be relaxed and you're communicating like a family member or you're talking, you might find that your effects of the food might be a little different too, where you can relax. Now if there's toxins or poison in there, you're gonna know it.
Right. Right.
But if you can actually relax as a human being, you might find that you'll be more calm. If you're always in a hurry, that's kind of why, we trucked the way we did. Mm-hmm. Never in a hurry, but
well, you're removing stress.
Yeah, we always had to. If you're talking about 650 miles, 700 miles in 24 hours, that's in a hurry. I mean,
for sure.
If that's going to take 12 to 14 hours to drive it, I mean, what are you going to drive more than that?
It's a long time in the truck. So, and the other thing is stay away from processed food. If you're on the road, don't eat processed food because it takes a long time for your body to break it down. So if you want to feel tired, eat processed food.
Pretty much. It's I definitely quit eating. Unfortunately, there's a lot of things, but if the potatoes were real or fresh, if somebody, I'd ask them, are your hash browns fresh? You guys use real potatoes? And 1 out of 100 will come up with fresh hash browns, and everybody else says no, they're out of the bag.
Yeah.
Your baked potatoes, they can be a mystery. Sometimes you'll have a good one, and sometimes it'll be a baked potato, but it really won't be that great a one.
Right.
Mashed potatoes. Just the other day, I got some mashed potatoes. They weren't even real, the instant kind. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me.
Well, one thing is, don't be afraid to ask if something's real or not. Like, I've seen you plenty of times ask, whether people at the table are saying, don't, just leave it alone. You'll ask anyways, because you want to know. You want to know what you're eating, and that's how everybody really should be. You shouldn't be afraid to ask if the restaurant is something real or not.
So anyway, the one story on that is, so I'm asking, and so this waitress, after, I break down the whole menu. I mean, I'm asking these questions about trying to find something to eat. She looks at me and she says, "Are you always this high maintenance?"
Oh no.
I'm like, pretty much. Until you answer my question, I'm not gonna
Oh man.
order something. But she was joking about it, you know.
Well, right.
Some people don't mind. Some people don't know. They'll go ask. But yeah, for when I was going through that, not knowing better, you know, 2010, 2000, all the way to, you know, it took me many years. In the last 3 or 4 years, I kind of know. You know, when I look at the menu, I kind of know what to expect. But when I was going through that phase, it was like the hash browns real. The gravy, you can make that from scratch, or is it coming out of a packet?
Yeah. One time you asked about the ice. I can't remember what you had asked, if it was through a filter or something. You were asking about the ice one time.
I said, do you make your own ice?
Oh, that's what it was. Or do you bring it in? Something like that, yeah.
Because at that point, I would dissect it in many ways, and I was always just trying to find out how fresh it was.
Well, right, and by doing that though, you were probably able to pinpoint more things in ways that you can feel good and things that don't make you feel good. Because now you know if it's brought in or if it's here or if they make it.
Right.
You know, it gives you a little advantage that way.
Right.
You just don't be afraid to ask. Too many people are. I see it all the time. I'm someone who's not afraid to ask anymore either. Brooke, you know, she'll say things too because I will speak up and ask in a lot of different situations, and I think people get embarrassed sometimes, you know, but why? You're not making a mistake by asking. You know,
if they're not willing to answer, because every place that has good food, they're very willing to tell you that their food is great.
Exactly.
This is it, you know. And every now and then somebody comes out there and says, "Oh, we have the best meat in the world. It's USDA inspected, and it comes from, you know, the local butcher shop." I'm like, you told me everything I need to know.
Right.
So, like I said, if it's raised by the big beef houses, I don't. Like I say, some people like it. I don't. I try to avoid them, but.
Well, you can like it, but it's not gonna do much for your health. That's basically what it is trying to be healthy on the road. You know, you're gone. You guys are gone for often a couple weeks at a time or more right now.
Unfortunately, this last time we bought our truck, we were using a different system. We're not leased onto somebody. We're not functioning under one individual, so we don't have a dedicated route. So we find that finding that dedicated lane that gets us home can be a challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're about ready to change that, though, I think so.
You've been used to one way, and you'll get back to that way. It's some trial and error now to get back there, you know. You're doing it a little different than you're used to.
That's it.
So, but that's the thing, like being on the road longer, you're not having more struggles because of it, though, with food and stuff, are you? Like,
if you're on the road for, you know, a couple weeks without getting home for 2 or 3 days, you'll get run down. The food not getting just a little break, it'll beat you up pretty bad. You'll tell it.
So that's why it's even more important to find the right things and do the right things, because you need every bit of energy that you have and rest.
The lifestyle is just, you know, if you're gone all the time and the quality of rest, the quality of food, I mean, pretty soon you're just not functioning real well.
Right. Well, is there anything else that you want to add today?
Well, that should just about cover it. It's probably have a lot of other things to talk about, but for now, that should.
Sounds good. Cool. Well, thanks for being here today, Amos. I appreciate it. And thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay happy, stay humble. Make good choices for you and those around you.